Good morning. If you had joined us last week, you would have learned about how it is often typical, or common rather, for children as they're developing their language, especially in the preschool years, to start developing a stutter. We chatted about the differences between typical types of stuttering, such as using fillers like like, also a typical type of disfluency or way of stuttering could be repeating whole words or phrases. And then we also talked about when it could be a bigger problem that could be longer lasting. So disfluencies are types of stuttering that you don't see very often in typical language development, such as blocks, like if they get stuck on a certain sound and it can't come out, or if you hear them elongate or prolongate a certain sound and that sound is hard for them to get out fluently. Those are two examples of less typical disfluencies that usually require more intervention. Another less typical disfluency could be repetitions of the first sound of a word. And so if you're hearing those more often in your child, those are usually red flags that the stuttering is not something that they will just outgrow, but it actually requires professional intervention or at least some guidance and coaching on what you can do as the parent at home. So today we will be talking about what you can do if you have a child who has already been identified or you're pretty strongly convinced that your child has a fluency disorder or a stuttering problem that needs some extra support. This is not something that they're just going to outgrow. And if we haven't met yet, my name is Jessica Bauig. I am a speech language pathologist and owner here at Fluence Children's Therapy in Tacoma, Washington, and I love joining you every Friday morning so that we can have these conversations about communication to really empower you as the parent so that you can have some practical tools and strategies to help your children communicate more clearly. So again, today we are chatting about how you can help your child who has already been identified or you are strongly convinced that your child has a fluency disorder, and we'll talk about different strategies that you can use. So here at the clinic, we work with a lot of young kiddos, as young as not even 2 yet, maybe 1.5, all the way up through school age, but really our heart here at Fluence is for the young children because we strongly believe and know that the science and the research shows that early intervention is crucial and really critical for getting our children off on a good solid footing. And that's the same with kids who stutter as well. Whether you decide to take an indirect or a direct approach, and we'll talk about the differences between the two, getting that support and that help for your children early on, as soon as you're pretty sure that it's not something they're going to outgrow, getting early intervention is really key for, again, setting them on a path to success. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, okay, Jessica, but I've got a 7-year-old and he's been stuttering for the past 2 years. Is it too late for me? Absolutely not. Any time that you realize, yes, my child needs extra support, go ahead and seek that support. Most of the time it's going to be from a speech language pathologist. That's going to be the person who's really trained and experienced in this area. So seek their support. But again, if you're identifying and you've got this gut feeling that, my 4-year-old or 5-year-old, I feel like this isn't something they're going to outgrow. They're using more of those less typical disfluencies, go ahead and get the support now because early intervention is key. Once you get that evaluation from the speech language pathologist, if they say, yes, your child has a fluency disorder, they are stuttering more than the typical kid, we don't think it's something they're going to outgrow, there's a couple of different things that therapist could do, and those are the same strategies that you can apply at home. So there are, most of the strategies fall into 2 different groups, direct approach or indirect approach, and we'll talk about a few of those here today. When it comes to the direct approach, that is exactly what it sounds like. We're drawing attention to the fluency disorder, we're drawing attention to the stuttering, not in a mean way or a critical way. but just a way to make the children more aware of what's going on in their body, teaching them strategies about how they speak, how we all speak from a physical standpoint. Lots of therapists, when we're working with stuttering and fluency disorders, will talk to the children. Depending on their age, it'll vary and we can adjust it based on that, but how we use our breath and our voice and move different parts of our mouth to get the speech out. And sometimes, a lot of times, kids who stutter have that mechanism is not running as smoothly as it should. So a direct approach would be drawing attention to that, teaching the children that this is how we breathe. You know, we could practice deep breathing, belly breathing, showing them in a mirror or on video what they look like when they're talking, and we can identify, oh, that was bumpy or a stutter, and let's look at how your body looked when that came out. Sometimes we'll see children who stutter talk when they're inhaling air, so they like that, and that's not coming out as smoothly as if we were breathing and talking on exhalation. So those kinds of strategies, talking about how your body works when you are speaking, is a direct approach to addressing the stuttering. Another direct approach could be teaching them specific strategies on how they can make their point of contact more soft or gentle, and that is, sometimes you'll hear it like easy onset or things like that, and that is a way for, again, for them to really be aware of how they're speaking and how their message is coming across, and to teach them tools and strategies to make that a softer, especially if they're getting stuck on certain sounds and words. To take a deep breath could be a strategy. Using like a or a ah before going into it. Sometimes we'll draw a picture of a slide, so it could look like this, like a playground slide, and it could be something visual so that we're helping them to, okay, when we're getting stuck, we're gonna slide down smoothly to get our sentences out. So that's another direct, these are all direct approaches. We're drawing the child's attention to the stuttering, even just giving them verbal feedback, and that's something that therapists may encourage families to do. It might not be all day, every day, because then that child could develop a complex, or, start to shut down and not want to communicate at all. But it could be at strategic times throughout the day. Maybe they have a homework time, or a work time, or a reading time, or a bath time, or whatever kind of routine, building that in, and just the parent is just giving the child feedback as they're communicating. Oh, that was a little bumpy, or oh, I really liked how smooth you said that sentence or that word. And so giving them that, helping them to discriminate between how their words are coming out by giving them verbal feedback is another direct approach to addressing the stuttering. And again, that's not something that we want to do all day, every day, but for 15-minute chunks throughout the day, that could be something that a therapist could recommend the parent to do at home, again, just to draw the child's attention to their stuttering. The one thing that I always talk to parents about is that it is a fine balance, because there is going to be often a psychological component, as with all communication disorders. We want the children to be able to freely express their thoughts and ideas. We don't want to disrupt that communication from them, because we want them to be able to share with us their thoughts and ideas. We want them to be able to make friends and build relationships with other people. So by constantly correcting or drawing attention to it, that could really pull away from their just free expression of thought and communication. So again, if we are taking that direct approach, we want to make sure that it's at structured times and about 15-minute chunks a day. So those are some direct approaches that are pretty commonly used in dealing with and addressing and supporting fluency disorders, which is another word for stuttering. And those are things that you could do at home as the parent as well. Some more of the indirect approach. So indirect is almost the complete opposite, as the name would suggest. Indirect approaches means that you're not directly drawing attention to the stuttering or to the fluency disorder. And what you are doing is you're accepting your child for where they are and how they're communicating now, playing alongside them side by side. This is an approach that we often see with younger children, just because they may not be at a level yet where they're understanding, where they're at a point where they can understand how their body, their physical mechanisms work to produce the speech. They may not be able to regulate themselves to really control that. So an indirect approach would be a lot of verbal praise for just talking and communicating. We also see this approach sometimes when children are starting to recognize it in themselves and start to shut down. So instead of drawing more attention to the stuttering, we often will take an indirect approach, allow them to just play and be free and really build their confidence. Again, the psychological and social emotional component is really strong when it comes to kids who stutter, so we want to protect that for our children. And an indirect approach can be very useful in that way, by just not drawing attention to the stuttering, just letting them play and communicate and interact with other kids. It could also be educating other children on how your child may be communicating differently than them. So if you're starting to hear things on the playground or at the park, comments that other kids are making about, Johnny sounds so weird when he starts to talk, and you start to see them maybe distance themselves from your child, an indirect approach would be not addressing Johnny, your child, or the child who stutters, but really to talk with the other kids and just to teach them about how people are different, people communicate differently, we can still be friends. Here are some strategies that you as the friend can use in a really simple way. Another indirect approach would be as the parent or the adult interacting with a child who stutters, to slow down your rate of speech, almost to a rate that seems unnaturally slow, to see if by slowing down your rate of speech, if your child will then mirror or copy you and also slow down their rate of speech. So see, it seems it's something that I consciously have to do when I'm working with kids who stutter, and it often works, and you'll be surprised, especially because you've got such a close bond with your child as the parent. Sometimes it takes slowing our bodies down, and in this fast-paced world, it's hard, but we can do it because it will help our children. So that's another indirect approach. We're not specifically telling Johnny, okay, Johnny, slow down. Okay, stop. Okay, say it again. That's not what we're doing, but we are slowing ourselves down and slowing our rate of speech and really talking clearly and slowly to see if Johnny will pick up on that on his own. So those are some strategies for direct approaches to supporting children who stutter, and indirect approaches. Again, both can be useful. You can use both at the same time for some kids in some settings. Sometimes what we'll see is the direct approach is taken maybe in a therapy session or at school, and a more indirect approach is taken at home to really, again, protect that relationship with the parent and the child. And sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't, and we need to just stick with one. So every kid is different. You can try different things and see what works best for your child. If you've been taking an indirect approach and it's not been working over the past 6 months, years, or whatnot, then you might want to consider switching to some of the direct strategies and see if that helps your child even more, because we would hate to get them even more frustrated with their communication to stop some of that flow of their thoughts and opinions. So let me just check my notes real quick to see if I missed anything. I think that's pretty much the gist of it when it comes to, again, some of those indirect approaches, really focusing on building your child's confidence and thinking about strategies that you would use with any kids. So modeling good turn-taking skills within communication and conversation, so not interrupting them, letting them, allowing them that space to really talk and communicate with you, asking them questions to, again, elicit more communication, especially if the child is already becoming aware of their language and differences, their speech differences, and just encouraging them to continue to talk. So I hope that was helpful and gave you some nuggets of strategies that you can use at home to help your child who stutters, and I look forward to seeing you next Friday morning back here for another conversation about communication. Take care.